Welcome everyone to Straight Up Book Club. Today we're going to be discussing Acts 6 and 7 of Hanya Yanagihara's A Little Life. Those are the final two acts of this book, so there's a lot to unpack here today. And it's also the last episode of this season, season 2. We're going to take a little break for a month after this episode, have us all take a moment, a little breather from this book, which has been wonderful, but a little bit heavy for sure. And then we're going to return next month with something a little lighter. And I think we're going to let all of you kind of help us decide what we're going to be reading. So
Season 3.
Season 3. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. More on what we're going to be reading later. But first, before we get into the book, Nat, tell me how your week was. Anything like interesting happened?
Yeah, so last week after we recorded, I went and played pickleball for the first time, and that was really fun. I was really bad at it. I'm not very athletic, so I was definitely running around trying to get the ball back a lot.
Would you do it again though?
Yes, like we found this club that's really fun. It's kind of close to us, and yeah, I think we're gonna go more often. But I'm such an old lady because and out of shape because got so sore after, and then like my back has been killing me. So I'm gonna take a little break and then I'm gonna get back into it.
Selfishly, I really want to come. I want to do like a double date for pickleball.
Yeah, we should. That'd be so fun.
Would you go to the same venue again?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can bring guests. So yeah, we'll bring you. We'll do it that way.
I'm so excited. I got into tennis last year and I loved it. I thought it was like so fun. Although I found out after that my partner was going easy on me, and I was kind of like, oh, maybe. And then a few times later, I was like, can you just like play like I'm actually your competition? And he, it was very, very difficult. So I don't know. I've got a lot of learning to do, but I would like to do some pickleball with you guys. I think that would be fun.
Okay, good. I think we might be at the same level. That's good.
I thought I was doing so well. Like there was one game when I beat him or almost beat him, and I was like, oh my god, like I'm doing great here. And then I found out he was just going easy on me at the beginning. Not fun, but.
How was your week?
It was good. It was pretty busy, but last Saturday when you went to go play pickleball, I went to go see the movie Civil War. It was amazing, super like dark, very gruesome, so if you don't like blood and gore, I probably wouldn't watch it, but if you can watch that, oh my god, it was amazing. I thought the storytelling was really well done. I thought the acting was phenomenal. It was really heavy for sure, but I would definitely recommend it. And I mean, if you can read this book, I think you can watch that movie. But
yeah, I'm excited to watch that movie too. And actually, that also reminded me of something else I watched this week, which is or something I watched this week, which is Baby Reindeer.
Oh my god!
Did you watch that?
Yes, I'm not super far along. Like I haven't finished it, but it's incredible.
Yeah, doesn't it kind of remind you of this book? There are so many parallels. Or
I'm having a moment.
I was watching it and I was like, this is like, I guess I had just like finished. And I was like, wait a second, like this kind of, well, I mean, in terms of, you know, some of the trauma that they're going through, some of the situations they're putting themselves in, there were similarities. I don't know, maybe I was just like, I've just read this book and I was just finding connections.
I'm also not super far along in the show, so there might be some things to be revealed that I haven't seen yet. No, it's okay. No, no, it's okay. I'm not gonna let my mind go anywhere. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna try not to let it go anywhere, anyways. But yeah, I've watched a couple episodes. It's really well done. The beginning of it, I definitely felt like, I think I said out loud, like this feels like a book when he was narrating it.
Yeah.
And I think the guy who's acting in it also like wrote and directed it, and I think it might have been a book first. And apparently this is based on his real life. Like this happened to him.
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, my partner was telling me about that too. Apparently, yeah, there was some harassment of the woman who is doing the stalking. Someone found her online or something like that, and yeah, I don't know. So there's that part of it too, when the internet finds the people behind the true stories. I guess they run with it.
All right, I'm in for some big surprises, I think. I guess as always for this book, like we'll do a quick trigger warning. Everything we've mentioned before, there is child abuse, self-harm, suicide. So if any of those things are triggering, then I would not listen to this episode today and join us next month when we read something a little bit later.
Yeah. Do we want to do a quick summary before?
Yeah, go for it. Tell me a story.
Tell you a story. Okay, so now we're getting to, so Willem did, die in that car crash. So did Malcolm and Sophie. And so we're figuring out what happens with Jude and everyone else that's sort of left behind in that situation after. So we're really getting to, we had talked about last episode that we're probably going to see Jude in a dark place, and that's what came to be. We really got to see, how he's starting to create distance between him and the people that love him. They really want to be there for him, and he really doesn't want that. He wants to go to work, be ruthless at work, come home, and just sleep through when he's not at work. It's really dark. It's really sad. And we get to see a little bit more about Harold sort of trying to help Jude, not successfully really. And we also find out that Andy is leaving his practice, so that's kind of an additional blow to Jude. Yeah,
he doesn't take that very lightly.
No.
What did you think of that? Like, it's funny because this guy is fictional and I still feel like protective over how I talk about him.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of moments in these acts where I was getting really frustrated with Jude. How did you feel? Like his anger towards Andy when Andy tells him that he's retiring, and he says that like he's still going to be his friend and he's still going to be looking after him. But the guy's getting older. He's been taking care of Jude for so long, and that's gotta be, I don't think the guy slept. Because when it would talk about like at night, Andy would call him at like 1 a.m. every night or midnight or something like that, and that was like a regular thing that they did to check in on him. Like he's also a doctor managing a practice. Like he had a wife. Didn't he have kids? I'm not totally certain, but
I think so. That sounds right.
Yeah, like what did you think of that interaction between Jude and Andy when Andy told him that he was leaving?
Yeah. It's interesting because you're right, like he's been doing it for so long. Shouldn't Jude have prepared for this in some way? Because he has this really like analytical mind, right? He's very like rational, he's very prepared. At least in his work he is, but maybe in his personal relationships not so much. Or maybe he's just assuming Andy is, or maybe he just doesn't want to let himself go there. What it would be like without Andy.
I think too, he's always thought that he was going to be he would almost die.
Yes, yeah.
Before Andy would retire, before Harold would die, before all of these things would happen. So I think he saw himself as leaving everyone else before they left him. And now he's seeing people start to leave him, first with Willem, and now with Jude. And now with Andy. And Malcolm. Oh my god, yeah. He really did think that he was going to be the first to go. And now he's having these blows one after another. Okay, maybe I feel like I'm being too harsh on Jude now when he had that little bit of a freak out. I don't think Andy deserved it. I think that was horrible. But I can also understand what was going through Jude's mind when it was like first Willem and Malcolm and Sophie, and now Andy is leaving him in this other way. That's a lot. That's really heavy.
Well, it's also that it's really complicated and neither's in the right and neither's in the wrong, right? Andy has every he should be able to retire. He should be able to live a stress-free life, He
dies of a heart attack after.
Yeah, right? So it's where are the limits of responsibility in this situation too? And I think that this book is really getting us to explore that a little bit too. It also ties into, I think Jude says something along the lines of he didn't have survivor's guilt. He had survivor's incomprehension. Like he just can't wrap his head around that he's the one that gets to still be around, and everyone else is sort of leaving. What did you think of that?
it would, it's funny because I feel like I'm thinking of it now more than I was when I was reading it, but that's a lot. Survivors and comprehension. I thought that line was really beautiful. The whole, like, the difference of, like, no, it's not survivor's guilt. He doesn't feel guilty for surviving. He legitimately does not understand because he 100% thought that he'd be the first to go. He did attempt suicide earlier. It's always kind of on his mind. He always sees himself going before everyone, whether it's by that or by some sort of infection, which he touches on. So I think it's just pure, for lack of a better word, like, he's flabbergasted. Yeah. How are all of these people leaving before him? It doesn't make any sense because this wasn't the plan. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go. There's another moment too, the incomprehension part, where he also doesn't understand because he sees him as the worst of all these people. There's that moment when he is thinking about how Willem and Malcolm had died, and they were there was a quote, I think I put it in here somewhere, but essentially he had seen them as like the model forms of humanity or something like that, and him and JB as like the lowlier two, but at least JB had talent, so maybe he deserved to live a little bit more. And what did you think of that? That was also harsh too, and you know how I feel about JB. I have a soft spot for him, and for Jude to kind of think, oh, JB, you should have been in the car instead of them, like you should have been the one to die because you're not as good as them. That was harsh.
It's
even
horrifying.
Though it was a thought.
Yeah. It's horrifying that people have to deserve to live. Isn't that just baseline? Everyone deserves to live. So starting to categorize people by their characteristics or their weaknesses or their accomplishments, and then tying that to whether or not they deserve to live, that's really harsh and horrifying. And it's one of those things where Jude has so many skewed ways of thinking about life and how people should be, how he should be, how he's perceived, and I think it really culminates in this. He doesn't think that everyone deserves to live. He doesn't think he deserves to live, and it's really heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. It's almost like he sees people in his life in these sorts of levels, I guess, and like Willem and Harold are kind of at the top, and then like maybe Andy's a little bit below because he's leaving him by choice, and then there's Malcolm, who's very pure, but then he does have that moment where he thinks back to the time that Malcolm said something really cruel to him about how he wouldn't know what it's like to have parents.
Yeah.
And then there's like JB, and then there's Jude, and I honestly think that in the way that Jude thinks of himself compared to even people like brother Luke, he still sees himself as more lowly, and so I think in his mind, and maybe that's why he's such a good lawyer, because he categorizes everything and compartmentalizes everything so well. But then he also does that in a place where it doesn't really belong. Like, he shouldn't be giving these levels to all these different people. And yet, I guess maybe that's a natural thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah. I also was struck by, there's the examination of Jude after Willem's death. And then there's the examination of Harold after. I almost called him Harvey. It's like Suits, Harvey and Suits. I think because we're talking about lawyers, I don't know. So Canadian. So there was this examination of Harvey after Harold after Jude's death. Jude, we find out that the reason that there's this first person POV for him in some spots is because he's talking to Willem's painting after Jude's death and just trying to make sense of everything that's gone down with Jude, how he tried to be there for him, how he couldn't be, how no one could be, but they all tried his best and tried their best to be there for him. And it's so sad, to also be the people that are left behind and just trying to make sense of what went wrong and the role you played in it and what you could have done differently. And those are the things that just pick at you for life, right?
I think the hardest one for me of like what went wrong was a moment when Harold was, I think it was in that moment with Harold's first person POV where he is talking to Willem. It is, because he even says to the painting, I wish you were here to help Jude, because Jude was trying to kill himself through starving at that point. And then he thinks or says to the painting, but then again, he wouldn't be doing this if you were here, would he? Mm-hmm. And he's having that thought that like, if only you were here, this wouldn't be the case.
So if Willem was there and Harold's sort of, you know, Harold's thinking that, when Willem was around, there was a lot of self-harm that he couldn't stop Jude from doing. And then we find out after Willem's death, Jude's actually doing less of that. And so what do you think of that? Do you think that's true? That if he was around, he would have been able to get him to stop? Because I don't think he was able to get him to be any different for, I mean, maybe there was a period where it got to be a little bit less, but yeah, what do you think? Would it have helped?
I don't think he ever would have stopped, because I think it was pretty clear, like even in like their happiest of times, like he was still engaging in the self-harm.
Yeah.
But I don't think that Jude would have starved himself like he had. And then he ultimately, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, I don't know, but he ultimately does kill himself.
Yeah.
And he makes sure it's like quick. And Harold finds out about this. We get this all from Harold's POV. He like injects his heart with air.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. And I don't think that would have happened if Willem had been around. What do you think?
I'm not sure, because I think that, you know, things might be okay for a while, or they might be controlled for a while, but even with your loved ones, at some point, you know, you can take them for granted or not take take them into consideration as much, or their wants and needs into consideration as much, because even Harold asks or makes Jude promise, like, you're not going to do this thing, and for a while it does have a hold on Jude, right? Yeah. But then it gets to a point where it's not a strong enough motivation anymore, and he sort of begs Harold to release him of that. But it doesn't matter that he doesn't release him of that, right? So if it had been Willem, would it have been a stronger hold or not? I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I guess we'll never know.
We'll never know.
I was watching this like interview of I forget where it was, but the author was doing sort of a panel, or she was just doing an interview, and the host asks her, or asks the crowd, how many of you like really like felt for these characters? How many of you were really like despairing for these characters? And everyone raises their hands, and I'll find this and I'll link it. And then he asks, okay, how many of you just like cried reading this? So many people raise their hands. And he's like, I hope you're happy. I mean, obviously facetious, but yeah, it's just so like, it makes you feel so many things and so deeply.
What were the parts where you felt the most emotional reading it?
Yeah, I think it was the moments where he's finally, well, of course, like, you know, the trauma, that was really hard to read, but I think the parts that made me the saddest were when he's past that, at least, you know, in the present, but he can never really get past what's happened to him, and his happiness in his life, if he could allow it in, but with all that's happened to him, he's just not there, and he can't accept it, and that's really heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
That yeah, it's just been too much for him, so he'll never experience that lightness or allow for it.
That hope that like Willem could fix things by becoming a unit there, but then, and it does kind of not fix it, but it alleviates the pain for a little while, but then he kind of, at the end of the day, it's It's like too much has happened
Yeah.
to him for him to ever truly like find peace.
Yeah.
So that is devastating. I think Morty's trying to get out of the bedroom, so I'm gonna let him come join us.
Aw.
Look who's here! He's so happy.
I love how you're carrying him. Tilly would never let me carry her like that.
I can walk around with him for ages. If you get down right now, take a seat there, buddy.
It's the like scooping the butt part.
Come here. Okay.
Aw.
Well, I tried. He might go have a drink of water and then come back. We were talking about the devastating things.
Mm-hmm.
The things that really made me, I think, the most emotional were the moments when, I don't know, when it was these reflections of the relationships between the four of them. I think those are the moments on the subway when I was like, oh God, like, hold it together. And I do remember specifically, like, I kind of alluded to it earlier, where Malcolm had said that, like, harsh thing to Jude about how you wouldn't know what it's like. And then, like, a year later, he just kind of mentions to him, like, I can't believe I said that to you. And Jude's like, Malcolm, it's okay, that was ages ago, you're sorry. He's like, I think about it all the time. Like, that really gets to me. And then also the part where Willem, they're like talking about like whether or not your life can have meaning without kids.
Yeah.
And they kind of joke about how like, oh no, definitely not. Like, and I don't think anyone at the table has kids except for maybe Andy. And they're all kind of joking about it. But then Willem gets a little bit serious and he's like, no, I think my life does have meaning. And then he gets a little shy when he tries to explain. And he's like, because I have friends and I make them happy and they make me happy and I feel like I'm a good person. And I was like, oh, like that's really beautiful. And then I think
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
That was such a beautiful moment. And I love how shy he got. And he's an actor. Like, he's used to commanding a room and speaking, I would imagine, like being able to speak his mind, but he got very shy then, which I thought was sweet. And then the part that made me really sad is when Harold is reflecting on how JB has to grow old alone.
Yeah, that part, that's Harold's POV at the end there, that really stuck with me too. And yeah, JB does have to grow alone. Well, does he has a partner though? He's not. I guess he means like out of the four of them.
And he does say that. He said, you know, like JB obviously still has friends and he now has a loving partner that he seems to be settled down with.
Yeah.
But then Harold makes a note of like, but he'll never have the people that grew up with him, the people who he's known since his early 20s, who know him from all his different phases of life. All of those are gone.
Except Harold.
Yeah.
He knows him like that. And I thought that was really nice and special, where JB is still a part of Harold's life and Julia's life, like after the fact. Just because Jude is gone and Willem's gone, their relationship isn't gone. And yeah, I like that. That tugged at my heartstrings a little bit too. I wanted to ask you, what did you think about that final letter from Jude that Harold and Julia read, you know, after his death? Do you think it's cathartic? Do you think it's reopening wounds? Do you think it's helping or hurting at that point?
I think it will hurt in order to help, if that makes sense. I do think that he now has the truth, which I do think is something Harold always wanted, but he also wanted to respect Jude and not prying too hard. And he, I think, finally has that kind of closure in knowing all these things that happened to Jude. It's also devastating because he reads this and he's like, Jude thought that this was his fault. Like, he died thinking this was his fault. Like, that was really heavy. That, like, so I think that is something that Harold will have to live with, and I think that's something that will probably weigh on his mind, and as it would, of course, like, to know that, like, your son has died thinking that these things that happened to him were because of him or part of his character. I think that's really heavy, but I do think there's closure in the sense that he now knows. And then there's the gift of the disc of Jude's voice, of him singing these like operas, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something that he can cherish.
I agree with you. overall, it's probably cathartic, but it has to hurt a little bit to get there. The part that's really sad is, like you said, finding out that he thought he was to blame for any of this.
Yeah.
It's just a string of horrible things that happened to him that he had no control over, that he was a kid when they happened as well. And I feel like they probably think, well, if we had known about this, we would have told him all the ways that it wasn't his fault, and they won't be able to do that anymore. But it wouldn't have made a difference. It doesn't matter, you know?
He had people tell him that.
Exactly, yeah. And Willem did too, right? And okay, so following that argument of Willem's closer to him, so maybe things he says speak more to him, they didn't seem to. So, but I don't know if Harold and Julia will know that, you know, as parents, like, can you take that and really take it in? I'm not sure, but I do see it as, you know, a cathartic moment.
The very ending is really sweet. It's Harold going back to a moment shortly before Jude kills himself where they're taking a walk. It's a really, really long walk through New York, and they're kind of going through the neighborhoods they used to frequent. It almost feels like the last walk, did it not? Like, and they end outside of Lisbonard, the house on Lisbonard Street.
Yeah.
And Jude kind of coyly says, like, did I ever tell you about the time that we got locked on the roof? And Harold's like, no, you didn't. I would have remembered if you had. And Jude's like, I'll tell you. And that's how it ends. I have goosebumps even like recounting it. Like, what did you think of that ending? How did you feel? Like, this was such a heavy book. This has been a long while. It's taken us a month to read it. And, you know, unlike The Fury, where it was kind of like, I feel like I read it very quickly in like a day and then I couldn't wait to talk about it the next week. This was like every week, like immersed in it. Really, like, I felt like I was like living with these characters. And now, you know, the book is closed. It's going to go on my bookshelf. And it feels almost like a little bit of like an ending to some, like a, what's the word I'm trying to find? I don't know, a little bit of a, it's a harder one to put down, I think. What did you think of how it ended? How did you feel after it all? Tell me how you're feeling.
Tell me everything. I love that moment. It's almost like a device to get you back to the beginning of the book.
Yes.
Where they were just kids, they're kind of fooling around, and they had this moment that's like a really, I can see myself doing that in university. Like, oh, forgot my keys. You kind of
did stuff like that. I've heard the stories.
Yeah, you do dumb stuff, and it's just silly and fun, and it doesn't end up mattering. Like, sure, of course you tried to get back in through the window. You know, you think you're invincible, and it's just kind of nice to remind us that, you know, they had those moments too. They had some really special moments that bond you, and then you talk about forever, and you're like, can you believe we were that crazy?
So true.
Yeah.
These moments of lightness, where I genuinely believe that like all four of them were only thinking about the circumstances in that moment. Because I think all four of them, and especially like we obviously have the interiority of William and Jude, they're very in their heads all the time, and always thinking about the past and the future, and, you know, besides what's happening right now, like and I think that was just a moment where they were all just very consumed in this thing that felt very serious, but in a very light way. And there's something really beautiful about that being how she ended this book for us.
Yeah. Overall, I liked this book a lot. It was definitely, like, some moments felt like a lot to get through. We also read it, it's a long book, so I think, you know, part of why we're getting so immersed in it is because we're reading these big chunks over a week. To meet our, you know, like, our allotted whatever portions, but I think that was really nice in that it did immerse us, like you're saying. You know, I think that if I had come back to this book every few days or every couple of weeks, I wouldn't have felt it as deeply, and maybe that lingering would have made it harder to read, and I wouldn't have picked up on all that's beautiful about it. So I'm really glad that we read it at the pace that we did.
Me too.
Yeah. It'll stay with me for sure.
Same. I think it's a book I'll think about for a very long time.
Well, that's a wrap on season 2, huh?
That's a wrap on season 2. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have 4 books that we are kind of thinking of. We tried to find ones that were a little bit later in nature, just do a little bit of a palate cleanser, as we've been calling it. And we'd love to get your opinions on what we should read next. So we'll kind of post these as polls on our social media channels, but we'll let you know what they are now, so you can kind of take a little look on your end before we do that. Nat, you want to tell everyone what we're thinking of reading?
Yeah, that sounds good. So our sort of short list is Come and Get It by Kylie Reid. We've read one of Kylie Reid's books before for this book club, which we loved. Yeah, that was such a good book. So this is her second book. And then we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Have you read that Seven Husbands?
I read Seven Husbands, yeah.
I actually haven't read that, so this would be my first book by her.
Intrigued.
Oh yeah? Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I read it in the Bahamas with you.
Yeah.
I think. Is that what I brought? Yeah.
People have been raving about that book, so even though I haven't read that yet, I'm excited about this one. The next one is Good Material by Dolly Alderton, which actually, like, I never heard of that one. I love the cover.
Love a good cover. I judge books by covers, but I've never been disappointed. I'll pick up a book based on its cover or its name, and I've always found some really good ones based off of that. We should do a post on that sometime.
Yeah. And that, so that one I think is about a comedian and a relationship. So sort of talking about that. And then the fourth book is Sunshine Nails by Mai Nugent.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. I didn't do a synopsis, but maybe we'll post that on socials because that may be easier.
Love that. All right, so I'm looking forward to reading our next book in season 3.
Help us pick them out, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see you at book club.
Bye.
Bye.